Welcome to Some Things Considered, the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. I'm an author. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I run the nonprofit 1455 Lit Arts. For more about me and what I do, check out seanmurphy.net. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we are obsessed with creativity and story and narrative. And my goal in life is to find amazing, interesting people and talk to them. Today, and I'm Sean Murphy, your host. You can find out more about me at seanmurphy.net, but the focus of this podcast is on the people I talk to. Today is, I've been looking forward to, not just since we scheduled this, but in a sense, I've been looking forward to this for a couple of decades because I've known our guest electronically as one does in the 21st century. This is our first time sharing space. So I am so delighted to introduce Whitney Matheson. Let me give you the official bio. According to Wikipedia,
Oh,
Whitney is a pop culture writer. I revise that and say she is one of the most important and beloved pop culture writers, and she's made her myriad passions a gateway for discovery and celebration for her many happy readers. She was the author of Pop Candy, a popular entertainment blog that was part of USA Today from 1999 to 2014. She also wrote entertainment and pop culture features for the newspaper. So if you're tuning in right now going, I remember that name, I see that face, this is her. She was the person that we all went to every Friday and would get this digested, beautiful smorgasbord of everything that was important in culture. But she has a lot of new things going on. So I want to talk to you about the past, the present, and the future. But before that, let me just say I insist everybody you subscribe to her Substack, which is Hi, it's Whitney. Whitney Matheson, we have known each other for a long time, but this is our first official conversation. Thank you for
I
being
know.
here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was such a nice introduction. I don't know what to do with myself, but yeah, it's
Well,
good to see your face and talk to you.
yay. Well, so I mean, my goal here today, as always, have a great conversation, but and help facilitate people falling in love with this ebullient, knowledgeable cultural presence. I think the best way is for me to step out of the way. I gave the bio, but as we said before we came on air, no one is a metaphor for anything, but in a very positive way. You have really been at the forefront of when we talk about everything's changed from the internet to AI to 2025 and beyond, but you've been part of that world, and so you know where the proverbial bodies are buried. Maybe talk us through like your career in culture and how you've kind of seen everything that's happened from the late 90s through the current time.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I guess I have. I'm a veteran. I'm and and often I'll tell people we're pretty sure I was the first I had the first pop culture blog at a major news publication. There was really nothing before I did that. Yeah, I went to I'm from, as we were saying, I'm from Virginia. I grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I wrote from a hometown paper. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I got out of there and went to school at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Um, and I continued to write. And even back, that was like mid to late 90s. And even then, it was like, pasting up the paper. It was still like stuff would go online, but nobody was really reading our stuff online. But then I was lucky to graduate in December of 1998. And that is, I would say, when there was a massive dot-com explosion. There were so many jobs. There were so many jobs in journalism. There
Yeah.
were lots of online jobs for journalism, and they were hiring a lot of people like right out of college who they could train because we were doing a lot of like the tech kind of behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
So, right out of college, I'm going to try to like not talk forever and ever, but right out of college, did I got a job at USA Today. And I was on the overnight news team, and that was in 1999. And so largely my job was being part of the team to put everything from the newspaper, next day's newspaper, onto the website overnight. I was working till like I think it was 6 to 2 a.m. So, yeah, back then it took a long time to do things that are now all automated. Like nobody does these jobs anymore.
Yeah.
But I stayed there knowing that, okay, I'm gonna, and slowly, uh, I started writing more and I knew like eventually I wanted to move into writing entertainment. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I had always done before that. And so yeah, I did start like moving and doing and obviously once people meet me and talk to me, they're like, why is she doing stuff about the impeachment trial? This makes no sense. And Kosovo, like what's happening? So yeah, then I started doing entertainment stuff and then I started Pop Candy as a weekly column and I was just starting to read blogs, I guess. Anyway, it started out as a weekly column on the site. I wrote about whatever I liked, which was mostly like indie film and indie music and all the fringe stuff that was never covered by mainstream news,
Yeah.
which was USA Today. And so I think because of that, like it pulled in a lot of new people, a lot of people were reading it, and eventually it became daily and it turned into a blog uh pretty early on. So I tell me where it continued. That kind of catches you up, and I did that
Yeah,
for a long time,
you did.
covered everything, traveled everywhere. Interviewed every like it was wonderful, and I had a great amount of freedom that sadly also does not really exist today. Um, and then it lasted until it didn't. And I was laid off with a lot of people at
Yeah.
that company in 2014 after many series of layoffs and furloughs and all the stuff that everybody who's worked in media around then is familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that's a perfect distillation of a very significant chunk of time. But I guess I want to emphasize the point that we're not only engaging in some wonderful and welcome nostalgia, you and I are, a living link to the the bad old days when we would, when we did the school newspapers in the 80s and 90s. That was a razor blade cutting and pasting. The internet happened. That was significant. And I think where this can lead us throughout the kind of the through line of this conversation is kind of everything has changed so radically, but past is always prologue. When you were just getting your feet wet at USA Today, I was at a still new company called America Online, right down the road from the main headquarters in Northern Virginia. But one of the things I noticed as a culture obsessed writer was I loved that AOL in those first few years had what they call Digital City. And there were actual reporters that wrote
Yeah,
about
that's
concerts,
right.
wrote about books. And I saw a clear future for myself. I'm like, I'm here. I do all this stuff anyway to get paid for it. And in a weird, and this is a theme that recurs probably through American history, but for the last quarter century, it was like a personal tragedy for me when I saw, because AOL was so successful, it kind of ironically made perfect sense for them to start outsourcing all that. And so rather than have Sean Murphy do a movie review, you just go to rogerebert.com, and this was like the supersizing of content, but the soulless depersonalizing of, we need to make this ubiquitous, so we're going to trademark and syndicate all this. So in addition to seeing how that world was dying in real time, Pop Candy was an example of something that could fight against the big guys from within the big house and still have that soul, still have that personality. So in addition to just providing amazing content, you are actually swimming against the tide. So we talk about, right, digital and papers going online and AI and everything, and we'll get there in this conversation. But those pressures were already forming in the late 90s in the sense of media is always wanting to make money with the least path of resistance. And what that ends up happening, I think, is that the individual voices get drowned out. So you were a
Yeah.
very vocal and wonderful individual, unique voice at a time when those pressures were already there to not have those kinds of voices.
Yeah, and at a time before social media, obviously, which killed blogging. But now everybody has a voice. But and like you said, I was very young. I started at USA Today when I was 21. So, it was like throughout my 20s and first half of my 30s that I was there and writing and working and doing all these things. But I was always very conscious of what I was doing. Let me see if I can explain this. Like I was very aware that I was working for a mainstream publication, and that, it was a place that covered it was like very mainstream, like the entertainment was like, A-list celebrities and a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and just because of the nature of what I'm interested in, but also who I am, it kind of made me push harder to get things in there. I really did try to get things in there that either were just never covered or, had an audience that wasn't being served. So I did a lot of stuff about comic books. I wrote a lot about new bands and, trying to like introduce things that just weren't seen in any sort of mainstream publication.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem saying you were and you remain a hero. You were really like you had the advantage of being like a cheesecake factory in a big mall, and you were serving farm to table cuisine. That was it wasn't just that you were a human individual voice, which was wonderful, but you really were pushing, the indie stuff that generally speaking wasn't the path of least resistance. We don't want to put too much emphasis on that, but there is something very heroic about getting an indie voice, championing indie, voices that were increasingly were and are finding, a difficult time in the mainstream to get attention. So we always need those voices, but I don't have any problem, belaboring the fact that you were a voice with a platform that rather than lean into kind of the easier, McDonald's version, you had your own voice in the things you wanted to do. So what a service you were providing for kind of the underground and also of course the mainstream. Your palette of passion, covers Pop Candy was a perfect name for that. But I guess maybe I'm emphasizing the point for maybe younger viewers that this wasn't something that just happened, say, in 2020 when COVID happened and then AI came in and everything, went corporate. There's always been this push and pull within kind of, mainstream that individual voices have never not been important.
And I did, sometimes you got to do both. So I do a story, and I have an essay I wrote about. That's how the most popular thing I ever wrote was out after it was about the KFC. What was it called? It was a KFC thing that had like chicken patties for buns. It's like whatever.
The double down.
The Double Down, the KFC Double Down is the most popular. I think it's still out there. It's the biggest thing. And it was just like, 3 paragraphs because I think I had some exclusive on it. But every KFC Double Down earned me like, the freedom to write about weird movies that nobody was aware of and,
Yeah.
all the kind of eccentric stuff that I'm into. So yeah, I was also very conscious that like, and that's the one thing I miss is having such a massive platform at that time and a massive reach where I could have the power really to elevate artists that I really believed in that weren't necessarily getting that attention.
Yeah, and I think, you've always existed, but certainly during the pop candy era, of this wonderful tension between what you just described. I'm assuming and hoping that you both from readership and the artists got the feedback that this was vital and crucial. I think you would have done what you did anyway, but this was all about the things we talk about that always kind of seem ephemeral and pretentious, but it's cultivating community, having kind of this loyalty and this sense of word of mouth, even if it's in the, the digital space, is still the most profoundly positive and organic way to spread enthusiasm. And that I think that's there's a lot of adjectives I've jotted down. I mean, and I think people watching are getting it. but this you combine this tremendous passion and enthusiasm, but also kind of this sense of advocacy. You want to use your platform to, enlighten people to things that they're not going to read about in every other column or every other book review.
And the community was really one of the best parts about it that emerged, and that I didn't really expect. There were so many people who were coming together and like commenting and sharing, um and we eventually we had parties all over the country where people could meet in person, and and I also decided very like, just because of I don't go negative because I don't see a point to it
Yeah.
really. Like, why would I say something negative about like a band that nobody's heard of anyway? Like,
Right.
what's the point? So
Yeah.
I tried to keep a very positive tone. It was also a time, at least earlier on, when snark was everything. And it was the biggest, sites aside from news sites were like Gawker and uh, Perez Hilton, and, all
Yeah.
very critical, just negative spaces to be in.
Yeah.
So I did try to cultivate something that was, a little more like positive and productive, hopefully.
Totally. And I think for maybe younger or less experienced writers that are trying to navigate, how to turn these passions into, careers or hobbies, um, it's really, I think, the stuff that lasts is genuine and authentic. So yes, there's fluff pieces and there's snark and there's a tremendous kind of gray area between. I've talked a lot about how it actually to write a good negative review is very difficult. It's a job
Hmm.
that everyone should take seriously. But at the same token, writing a meaningful positive review that isn't the clickbaity or obvious, peer pressured puff piece is challenging work. But that taps into one thing I wanted to both acknowledge and maybe ask you to elaborate on. I'm of the opinion that having these passions and combining it with a genuine desire to spread awareness, let the enthusiasm kind of authentically, confligate across the world is actually a talent one develops. It certainly comes from a genuine place, that you clearly have, and all of us that are culture obsessives have that real kind of joy in experiencing this music and all this art. But to turn that into a pathway to discovery, I think is a talent. And I think you're one of the best exemplars of that. How do you view, this combination of not just being a hobbyist or an enthusiast, but turning it into advocacy, is work. I'm imagining, right? It's a labor of love for sure, but it's work.
Well, I mean, God, I'm also glad that I don't have that job anymore, because that was huge amounts of work, and I would post up to 10 things every day, which is insane. Every hour I was posting stuff. It got to the point where it began to be too much. But yeah, I think that in order to do something like that well, you have to be genuinely curious um, about stuff, and yeah, and have a level of energy that I don't know if I have anymore.
Right, right. Well, I think what that also underscores is even while you had a huge platform in an era that was, good, bad, and ugly was different, and writers had access to larger platforms, long form journalism, print media, et cetera. But I think it's important for viewers to understand while you were doing those kind of legacy old school things, you talk about your comfort with taking on the workload and multitasking, being very busy, being very keenly attuned to how the internet was evolving. So in a sense, even while you were in this older paradigm, you were learning the skills that would serve you well as things did change. And I think that gets to cliches be damned, right? But the adapt or evolve, adapt or die. Your
Yeah.
your career and many of our careers are one where you see the tea leaves, you see the changes, and of course there's initial resistance or fear, but at a certain point one has to take one's words and passions and find ways to navigate, this environment that's radically different than it was 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I think like Certainly, yeah, part of the reason that it was successful is that I was very open to trying anything and doing also, so yeah, it was a blog. I'm trying to remember, like, we threw parties. I did live video before that was even really a thing. Somehow someone hacked my old school phone many years ago and I was able to do that. Like I would I would get photo passes in the like photo pit at giant shows and just have my tiny little like camera and people, like
Yeah,
just trying anything, throwing up like anything I could, taking I sent I posted photos from the red carpet, but this was like like phone photos. This is like so early that I
yeah,
was doing that.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, just like being able to, and I'm sure, I did a bunch of stuff that flopped too, but just
right.
being open to change and trying new stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reason, I mean, of course, I want to hear you talk about all that stuff. It makes me giddy to think about you like on the red carpet with it. The fact that you said camera, right, is itself, people are like, you didn't take it with your phone? Yeah, we didn't get to do that. Not that like digital cameras were a thing. But I think it also, again, it speaks to uh, just recognizing that as things have changed, this is the position that all culture obsessives and writers in general. I've talked a lot about this weird place we're in where in some ways no one can deny it's good that blogs now are very easy to maintain. There are ways to reach audiences. The challenge, of course, is that all of these voices are now out there in the wilderness. That's a democratic force, and that's all to the good. But in this kind of era of ubiquitous content, it's never been more challenging for writers, whatever their platform or reputation, to stand out. And I'm curious how you've kind of both navigated and viewed and talked to peers and fans about kind of these inevitable changes and how one adapts or dies.
Oh God. Well, let's see if I don't even know if I've done that, but I'll tell you what I've done in the years
Yeah,
since, if you can learn anything from it. So yeah, 2014 when I was laid off from USA Today, and honestly, I was one of the last people that like there wasn't a lot left. So, although I don't want to not you great USA Today, very grateful, great place.
sure.
But that was tough. I had a 1-year-old at home, and so my solution was I took a journalist in residence job at a university down in Tennessee. At MTSU, which is a wonderful school outside of Nashville. They have a great music recording industry program, which is why a lot of people go there, but they also have a very good journalism program. And so that's what I left that world. That's what I decided to do because I also had a baby. And but that was like the best thing because
Yeah,
I kind of got some perspective and I also got to be around young people because by that time I wasn't as young and got to kind of like see and teach. And I taught journalism and a bunch of classes and music journalism, all sorts of things.
yeah,
And so then I kind of like got to see what are their habits and what are they interested in? How are they moving through everything? And um, so I did that for 3 years and it was great. And then on the side, freelanced.
yeah,
And so, and even when I was on the side, like doing freelance journalism stuff, I also started to realize that wasn't really, and I lived in Tennessee and it wasn't paying a lot. Like the rates, and I'm sorry they're doing work in the studio next door if you hear anything. But it wasn't helping me out financially as much as it needed to. And so then I started moving out into a bunch of different things. So, I mean, if you want me to go into like, I mean, that's what people want to know. How do you make the money? How do you make money? And I have like 20
totally.
ways I make money.
Yeah,
So I started moving out for one into PR type work and handling like working with still working with the TV networks and the film studios and the streaming platforms and all that I used to, but then working like on the inside. And so handling a lot of their press materials I was writing, or if they needed like an interview with the director,
Yeah.
or a lot of them wanted commissioned reviews where my name's not on it, but they want me to produce the most brutally honest review
Yeah.
possible before it goes out, point out if there's anything, problematic or whatever.
Right.
So I started doing that kind of stuff. Um, and then after that gig, the college teaching gig was up, I came back to New York, and then I've been freelancing full time ever since. And I still do some of that. I still do a little bit of journalism, but honestly, I only really do it for the very few places that can pay a decent amount. I'm not giving it away. I've been doing this for so long.
Right.
And then now what the bulk of paid work is for me, the rent paying work is ghostwriting type things where I am actually writing. I do a lot for executives, uh, and they're entertainment executives, but also other industries and celebrities. And I'm doing everything from speeches and whatever, but it's a lot of op-eds. It's a lot of editorials because when you look at a news coverage right now, there's a ton of opinion stuff and everybody has an opinion and nobody writes. So that's so I am still in many publications, but I am ghostwriting for people who truly pay me, to be honest, way more than if I were directly to work for that publication.
I mean that's so illuminating. And I think, we always want to I sense myself having, been in the classroom, whatever like platforms I've had or access to younger audiences, and one always wants to be wary of sounding like the guy in the front yard, yelling, but also not wanting to be super negative. But I think real talk, we need to kind of assess the situation as it is. And I think, just in my lifetime, I mean, I had responsible teachers and professors back in a different century saying this is a hard path and it's going to be very difficult to be a creative and make a living. So, I mean, I didn't need to be disabused of like it's very few people write that New York Times bestseller out of the gate and just have a career. But knowing that right now, no matter how talented one is, no matter what connections one has, I think it's fair to say that the avenues for getting paid, I'm not even talking about well paid, right? We talked earlier about long form journalism and the media landscape. It's a very bleak prospect for someone that thinks they're going to be able to do what they love and get paid for it. But where do we navigate kind of that reality versus that doesn't mean you have to do something that you hate just to pay the bills, but you again are someone I turn to in terms of how do we meet that balance is in as healthy and positive a way as possible, but while being in other words, I'm trying. I mean, I think we've already made it clear, if implicitly, like it's ugly out there and it doesn't look like it's going to get easier. It is what it is, but how, do we find hope? And what did you tell, for instance, like the students? I imagine the conversations in the classroom are different than they were 20 years ago for anyone that wants to be a writer.
Oh, I mean, so different. Yeah, I mean, I had a whole class, honestly, on how to I had a freelancing class, but essentially that was like how to independently, because there was a small chance that maybe they could get like a job at a, local publication, like a local newspaper when they got out of school. But
Yeah,
that they had to know. I mean, I really had to make sure they knew how this is how you pitch. This is where you're going to pitch your story. This is like how everything from like, this is how you invoice them, like all that stuff, because I was never taught any of that. I was taught
right,
like, you're going to get out of school and you're going to get a full-time job and
right,
with health insurance and it's going to be
right.
amazing. So I think like I really, I tried to help and then I placed they wrote they wrote like as if for publication in my classes. So,
Mm.
and then I would help them place the stories. So, yeah, I just tried to make it as practical as possible and and be as tough of an editor, honestly, as possible. Just so that when they got out, there were no huge surprises.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
LinkedIn and doing like all the things and
Right.
teaching them I wasn't even taught how to look for a job really. So
Right.
yeah, all like, I mean, looking for a job is a job in itself. So
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Well, I've been encouraged. I think it was, kicking and screaming, but the more people I talk to that teach writing on the college level or run MFA programs, I think it was very long in coming, but now there's at least an acknowledgement of we need to have some non-creative discussions in these classes. We're doing the students a disservice if we're not equipping them with the fundamental kind of awareness of LinkedIn, jobs, things that are not either under purview of you're going to teach college too, or you're going to be a writer and get paid to do it. I think that's always been the elephant in the room, but I've talked to more people that are at least bringing those conversations into the classroom and making sure the students are aware. Like you're learning how to hone your craft, but you're hopefully learning skills that you will continue to nurture in the face of ceaseless rejection and lack of opportunity, and that's where the creativity really comes in, how to navigate that, which I think brings us to Substack. I think for a lot of us, what I'll start by saying what I endorse, I use Substack. What I like about this platform is that I think we went through a 10, 15 year wild west of blogs, and there was so much to love about those. Um, Social media, is that where you cultivate an audience? Is that how you engage? Substack, what I like about it is it is an environment that already exists where one knows that certainly you can get into politics and any number of topics, but for creative pop culture, cultural, writerly discussions, right now I can't think of a better kind of ecosystem that exists. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you found Substack and what your views, not in a pro and con of Substack, but we're getting to here we are in 2025. One must have a website. One should blog or, be active on social media as much as they feel comfortable or find that way of engaging, whether it's on Insta or TikTok or whatever. But for me, Substack still feels like terra firma, where it's like this is something where you can, in a polished professional way, without a lot of tech knowledge, you can write and put your stuff out in the world and find an audience that might be willing to pay you to do that. It's far from utopia, but I like it better than the more Wild West element of I have a blog and it's like a food stand on the road. If people discover it, great, but if they don't, it's going out in the void. This is such a crude analogy, but it's like the food court where people are already there hungry for content. There's avenues to discovery that I find I find some optimism in that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I also, yeah, my advice too has always been go where the people are. Go where the people are. You can, I would tell students, you can post something on your website if you want, but everybody's gonna have to come to you and find you. So where are the people? And that's where you want to go, and that's where you want to make stuff and or at least like promote your stuff and be seen.
Yeah,
So yeah, I do have in addition to my money work, I or the rent work, I do a lot of other more creative stuff too. And Substack is great. Before Substack, I was doing a lot I mean, I still do stuff I'm on Patreon as well, but and Medium was before that, but that was not a monetized place. So you were just
right.
like it was social. The people were there, but you weren't
That's
getting
right.
paid.
That's right.
So yeah, I love Substack and Patreon, and I've found that my audience has a good portion of my audience from way back when has followed me to these platforms, and
Yes.
it's made me much more easier um, to find. And yeah, there's a little bit, I get a little bit of income through those things. The best part about it is, like, again, there are no rules. So I can write in about whatever I want and in whatever form I want, and I can be weird, and I can do anything. And most of the time, like, the audience is pretty up for it. So that is like where you're talking about, not having to do a job you dislike. And, the jobs that pay us the most money, whatever industry they're in, like, it's usually the most painful things that pay you the most money. Like,
Sure.
so,
Yep.
I'm lucky in that, most of my gigs I really do enjoy, and it's really interesting because I'm always writing. It's always like a different thing that I'm writing about. So I feel like I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
But when I do get the job that is like torture for me to get through, I view it as, okay, this is underwriting what I really want to be doing. And that's all the other stuff. That's like the, stuff I'm doing on Substack, but also we'll probably talk about like all the other. I have a lot of the children's books and comics and fiction and like all those other projects
Yeah.
that I love. Yeah.
Okay, so perfect segue. Before I take that segue, I'll just put a cap on this by saying, for anyone who, whether, less experienced or younger, the point, I mean, there's a lot of points, but one of the points that I'm hoping that this all illustrates and illuminates is having a Substack or a blog now is almost like what a resume used to be. I mean, of course you need to have a CV and you need to apply for jobs, but this is a very positive way to have your voice and your writing sample, your portfolio available for discovery. So yes, you have to be proactive and go for the jobs and use the word of mouth and the connections and the networking, but this is a way that it could be an unintended consequence of your unique voice doing what you love can be discovered by others. So there's a lot of positives to this kind of formless and scary. There's a way that you can kind of take your future in your own hands. So I, of course, always encourage everyone to put their words out there. But speaking of these other things you're working on, funny that I
So
have a
many
couple of
things.
things here. Let's talk about these unbelievably awesome labors of love. And I want to be careful. I don't want to imply that these are kind of cute little side projects. These are
Yeah.
you in written form, and it's a part of you that I had never experienced. So I would love you to talk about the comics and the fiction. Are these things you've always done and are now making, available to the world? Talk to us about this other side of you that frankly has blown me away. Like she's even more talented and cool than I thought. Wow.
Well, let's see. Okay, well, when I moved, look, when my child from the toddler years, I was so tired. Let's not, there's nothing to talk about. I taught, I made money.
Right.
Like that's it. But when my kid finally went back to school, so
Right.
in, the last 7 years or whatever, I have, and being away from that wonderful blog that I wrote, but very time consuming.
Yeah.
Being away from that has given me, the space in my brain, as well as maybe a little chunk of time to pursue my own projects. So that includes, I'll tell you a few and then I'll come to the present. I've done many children's books. I've done a bunch of children's books for Epic, which is available through public schools. So if you have a kid in school, you probably know what that is. It's like the Netflix of children's books. You can read a bunch online. I did one that's in print that was pretty popular about how comic books are made. So it helps kids understand how that happens. Um, I started working in a studio with a dozen cartoonists when I moved back to New York. And I was not a cartoonist at all. I just needed a space to work because when I was home alone, I was feeling very sad and it wasn't good. And I wasn't feeling creative. And so that studio kind of collapsed during COVID. But I'm currently in a studio with four artists. And the one person who's always been with me is Dean Haspiel, who I actually wrote about a lot. I'm a big fan of his
I don't know if I froze or Whitney froze. Let's hang in there for a second and see if we can come back. Of course, the most tech savvy person I know, we have a technical issue. Not sure if this is on my end. Okay. I'm gonna let her back in. I have a feeling she froze up. Here she comes. Yay.
Gosh,
She's
was
back.
was that me? Did we lose?
I, I
Am I
I
talking
was
about
I
the
was
studio?
musing aloud. Like I've found that when I freeze on a call, I'm still able to see myself, so I don't know. But I was filling the time on my end saying, A, this I'm so glad this happened because it underscores like two people that grew up in the tech era. Of course we're gonna have a tech issue during.
I mean, of course, of course. And today, usually it's so quiet in this studio. It's like nothing's going on. Today, it's like people are banging and like there's drilling. I don't know what's happening. But yeah, I was just talking about so diary comics, done a bunch of those there. Well, you held up one. And so that's been great. And I'm an artist, not, I mean, I'm a writer, not an artist, as you can
Yeah.
see by my drawing style. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Uh,
So I started going to Comic Cons and selling those. What else? Oh, I wrote a couple plays. So I had one play, a great it was called, it needs to be produced, but I don't want to direct my own play. But we had a big reading, and that's about a woman who's a pregnant journalist. It's a woman who's very pregnant the whole time during the
yeah.
play. And she's visited by a rock star, an intern, and a mattress inspector. I had another play that premiered at the Brick Theater called Denny Barracuda that was then turned into, I adapted it into a short film, um, which I can send you whatever. But that went to some film festivals. I directed another short film. And then, yes, I also write short fiction and published one book called Trudy Sellout. And then this year, yes, recently published The Feeling. That's my new book. And it's 24 short stories. And they're all, I think, 3 pages or less. So
Yeah.
perfect for like your commute or whatever, your time in the bathroom.
Well, I mean, so first of all, congratulations. Secondly, again, I mean, you are, in my opinion, sui generis. Like, no one can be you. No one can be anyone. But like, no one has these capacities. So I'm kind of in awe. But what I think is a really nice takeaway is you epitomize this forward motion and this insatiable both passion to share and aid discovery, but you're channeling all this creativity into these things that, let's face it, I mean, 20 years ago, there were less avenues of getting those out into the world because you had to get through a gatekeeper and it had to be something that was tied to revenue. And now we can put our work into the world and let it land. There's no time limit on it. You know, a book can be discovered 5 years later, but this is, I think, such a good encouragement for people to understand that. Unfortunately, I think there's a hustle. There always has been, but hustle is the new normal for a creative. But there are ways, in addition to paying the bills and navigating, the craziness of life, period, these outlets that enable us to focus on what's really important. And I'm imagining, in addition to scratching that creative itch that those of us that write understand very well, but this is just also a way to really take advantage of the technology and the opportunities that are present. But it's also a lot of work.
Oh my God, it's so much work. Yes, yes. But I find it to be very rewarding. And yeah, I self-published both of those things. The mini comics I self-publish. I actually go through a company that does CD booklets, and I just like that they're square. And
Right,
um,
right.
yeah, and then the other book I self-published as well, but I'm trying to get it, and my goal is to get it into 10 New York bookstores, but by the end of the summer because bookstores are also independent bookstores are very open to
Yeah.
carrying self-published material. So if you publish your own book like that, then take it out and ask, to have it sold. I also go to conventions and sell stuff there. And then I would say the bulk of it I sell through my Substack and my Patreon. So that's another reason to have those.
Well, so again, we could unpack so much from that, but again, I think a takeaway for anyone watching is you got to get the work done, duh, and that's its own. But I do think we've talked a lot about the technology, just getting down to the creative life. I think a lot of artists pine for an ostensibly better time when one's job was to create the work and then other forces, most of them benign, not all of them benign, did the rest of the work. And now, again, I always want to impress upon people, hopefully in a very non-pessimistic way, that PR, marketing, brand building is part and parcel to being a creative. And again, I guess I want to kind of emphasize it's not that you have had to do it and you're lowering yourself. It's more, this is part of the gig now. So I hold you up on a pedestal as someone that is wearing all these hats and doing so in as positive a way as possible, but there's almost no way to avoid the reality that whatever kind of work you're doing, even, the ones that are fortunate and good enough to say have a novel come out from a big five publisher, the onus on the individual to reach their audience, help, you know, aid avenues of exploration and discovery are now part of the gig. There's unavoidable.
Oh yeah, it's part of it for sure. And but also, nobody knows your work better than you do. Nobody knows I know where the places where I think that people are my potential readers are going to be. I know my material better than anybody else. So I know so many people, writers who've had books come out and their PR department or their whoever's assigned to publicizing it doesn't understand the material, doesn't understand like
Totally.
where they're coming from or what podcasts to pitch or places to, go for. So it's like even if you do have like a publisher or like somebody big behind you, that doesn't really mean that they're gonna know what to do with it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and I bring that up to facilitate that insight, but also just I think the reality that for anyone, no matter how good, lucky, or whatever you are, those days are probably dead and gone where you do the work and you disappear. There's just not the J.D. Salinger, David Foster Wallace. Like, I write the work and I disengage, the Jonathan Franzen, like, and the
Yeah.
work speaks for itself. It's like you can and should write, right? I mean, I don't think anyone would, whether you're making music or art or books, do what you got to do and don't engage with the world if it's not healthy for you. But the good old days of having a machine behind your success are vanishingly few, and leaning into this and as in ways that work best for you are so important. But I also think this ties into the whole notion of community and being a cultural citizen. It doesn't hurt, Whitney, that you've spent decades championing work, building and curating and enlarging your own community and micro communities. A, that pays dividends when you have work to put out in the world. But B, I think it speaks to how we all stay sane and happy during times that I think could fairly be described as challenging, not just creatively, right? Culturally, politically. You've retained this joy, and I think it speaks to what I've hoped to illustrate today, which is it's life's work, right? There isn't a hat one puts on where one's creative and then one turns that off. It's all interconnected. And I think the ones that are succeeding now in staying positive recognize that we all need day off days, et cetera, and need to take care of ourselves. But being a literary citizen is a 24/7 gig.
Well, and I would like to say you brought up like JD Salinger and Dave Foster, like those kind of, and who wants to be those guys anyway? They're such a drag. I mean, it's much there. You don't want to cut yourself off from the world. The
Yeah.
best part is like when you interact with people and you talk to people who read your stuff or experience your stuff and like it. And
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of upsides to being your own kind of biggest publicist and advocate.
Perfectly put. And yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I think that also gets to something that I talk about a lot on this podcast. I can appreciate if it sounds, a bit much, but it's like there really is no point in doing all this work if one's not finding some kind of connection and joy. If one doesn't want to be in touch with their community, appreciate the people that read the work. There are people that can do that and have no interest in connection, but the whole, I think, point of this endeavor that's so fraught with rejection and silence and lack of money is the wonderful opportunity that writing and creativity brings to find that community that might not otherwise exist. And I've always leaned into, technology and adapting or dying because there are ways we can connect with audiences that weren't possible 20 years ago. So on balance, yeah, financially it's more challenging. Opportunities to reach larger, engage with larger platforms, but how cool is it that now we can connect with every reader and have those mechanisms of feedback that then, right, whether it's one's own work or other work, that's where the awesome stuff happens behind the scenes and the communities kind of thrive that way.
Oh yeah, I totally agree.
So I would be, I think, remiss to not at least mention the word AI. I think you, again, epitomize like how do we create and how do we thrive in an AI soulless world? I mean, the answer is, right, like make your own stuff, make work that is the antithesis of what AI promises, which is everyone can do it, easier paths, like less resistance, more uniform. Creating one's own work, I think, is the ultimate antidote to feeling the despair of like, why bother? Because computers are doing everything. It's like there's always been voices that say technology is going to kill creativity. I think our conversation today highlights that it can be the exact opposite of that.
Sure. I mostly agree. I mean, of course, I can't totally talk about it. There is a part of me, like everybody, who's very nervous. Every writer, I think, who's very
Yep.
nervous. And, I do regret, I have zero skills with my hands. I mean, I guess I can draw crude comics, but I have like, it's like, oh God, I should have learned to like be a plumber or something. Like, because AI is not going to affect those people. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of creativity, like, yeah, I think we have to keep making stuff to stay sane. And
Yeah.
I am pretty confident that AI can't make the same things I'm making.
No.
But yes, I of course there is part of me that's concerned what our conversation's going to be like in 5 years from now or less.
Right. Well, I mean, I bring up AI because I have a contrarian take that despite the obvious implications on the job market and the myriad ways it's going to disrupt, I think the hunger for meaningful, original, unique voices not only will remain healthy, but it will probably be augmented. So I think in the shorter term, there will be a real desire for authenticity, and a real desire to discover fresh music, things that one doesn't find in the so-called mainstream, which brings us full circle, right? We need the voices that are advocating and helping expose larger audiences to voices that they might not otherwise find. And I think that is what you're still doing on your Substack, right? You're doing your own stuff clearly, and we've talked a lot about how you're kind of, giving voice to your different passions. But at the end of the day, what you're also still doing is celebrating all this unbelievable content that's out there. And I don't know if there's a better or more effective way for us to champion all the work that we do than to celebrate it.
Well, and I think like, the need for art is only increasing. Like we will never stop desperately needing art. We need it, the harder times become, the more I think we need all art in all forms. And not only that, but we need to connect to each other through art and creativity. So that always I remind myself, and that does give me a lot of hope.
Yeah. That you just put more succinctly and eloquently what I was attempting to say, which is I think the more challenging the times, whether we're talking about technology or politics, sociocultural pressures, that's what art's for. And art, I think, reminds people that it's not an escape, that this is why we work so hard. This is why we do the things we do so that we can enjoy what humans are capable of, which machines can't do. So it's not super profound, but it's also, I think, profound in its simplicity that what creatives have been giving the world are the things that sustain us, especially when times are challenging.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
So what is next? What's the next big project aside from your Substack? Are we going to see more of this in the world? Um,
Oh gosh, let's see. Um, well, today I'm drawing something for an anthology, a comics anthology. Also I have a manuscript for a memoir that I want to actually with this, I do want to go through the big channels.
yeah,
So one day I hope, but it's look, if you guys, anybody listening, watching knows, has the power. Yeah, I have. So I've been on a couple, I worked on that on a couple residencies, but it's a memoir, that does address a lot of the things that we talked about, but it's told through, uh, 50 cultural touchstones. So it's a memoir slash cultural history of 50 different things. Um,
amazing.
and I don't know, there are always other things. That's what comes to mind right now.
Yeah. Well, I hope I've done a tolerably adequate job of trying to talk about the multitudes that are Whitney. I think just you talking and highlighting the things that you have worked on and are continuing to work on, actions speak louder than words. But I just need to acknowledge that it's so inspiring for me to see someone that is following their bliss, doing the hard work, right? Because it isn't necessarily easy, but it should be joyful work. And you have been a champion. I mean, I did a lot of freelance during the earlier part of this century. And you were kind enough to give me a shout at Pop Candy. I guess I want to acknowledge that this stuff matters, and the work that you do and have done has undeniably made our cultural and literal world a much more positive and happy place. So grateful for you and the work that you continue to do.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice. Thank you. Yeah, you're sending me it's the rest of the day, like floating a little bit. I appreciate it.
Well, you do that for all of us. So again, it's not only an absolute joy to shine a little light on you, do for you what you have been doing for so many of us for so long. But I'm so excited for the next steps, and we'll check in down the road and see where kind of these socio-political and technological trends are taking us. But Whitney, I'll put in all the summary materials how people can find you. But
Yeah,
while we're
yeah.
on camera, people that are like, I need to discover her right now. Where do people go to check you out?
Well, you can go to my Substack, which is whitneymatheson.substack.com. From there, you can even order those books. I'll send them out. I send them out right from my desk here, and I include a little personal note.
Little
Um,
handwritten notes.
yeah,
It's so great.
yeah. Also, I'm on Instagram at the Whitney Matheson because there's a Canadian man named Whitney Matheson who got my username first. Those are the best ways. I mean, yeah, that from there you can find me in all other spaces.
Folks, check her out. I mean, if I've done my work here today, it's try to stay out of the way and let this ebullient, wonderful force of positivity radiate through. I think mission very much accomplished. But Whitney, thank you for being here. All the best. Thank you for
Oh
shining a
gosh.
light, during times when we need that light more than ever. And all of you, go check Whitney out. Thank you for tuning into Some Things Considered. Again, this is the podcast where we're obsessed with creativity. We love to talk about story and narrative and how it plays into our lives. If you want to be on this podcast or know someone that should be, let me know. And we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Some Things Considered. Find out more, including how to be a guest, at seanmurphy.net. Reminder, we are obsessed with story and celebrating creativity. Also, we're here to advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Drop us a line, get involved, and support our creatives who are the lifeblood of our culture. I'm Sean Murphy. See you on the next episode of Some Things Considered.